It's Tuesday morning, 8 o'clock a.m. as of the recording of this. You're listening to The Fringe. I'm Mike Berquist, and on The Fringe, I bring you political news and commentary at the beginning of every week. Let me just apologize right out of the gate. Seems like I do that every week, but that of every week, this is what, episode 3? Maybe 4, I can't remember. But the point is that I don't have a studio of my own. That's something I preface a lot of these shows with. So getting the shows recorded and then out is not always easy or possible. So yesterday, for example, the show usually comes out on Monday. Um, I could not find a time or a place to record. There was just too much going on around here, and I had to push everything back to today, Tuesday. So it is now Tuesday, and we're going to do the same show uh, as we normally would. Nothing content-wise is really going to change. Um, However, I was sort of there was a silver lining in a way that I couldn't record yesterday, and that silver lining was there really wasn't any big political news. I had gone to the big three, at least cable news site websites, those being Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC. That's my opinion. I'm sure there's others like BBC that you could go to, Al Jazeera if you're so inclined. I don't know who goes to Al Jazeera ever, but yeah. So the point is that when I checked those three websites, I noticed the same story was basically the lead for all. And for Monday morning, for there to be no real hard hitting political news, that's not very common. The story that they were all running with, just to give you some insight into how little there was going on, was this issue about Joe Biden being too touchy feely with women and girls just throughout the years of him being a sort of political person. Now, the Joe Biden thing is very interesting to me because I think it's an excellent example of double standard is not the right word. I can't go up with the word, but maybe hypocrisy, or just hypocritical sort of thinking on the left. Now, um, I didn't really plan on covering the Joe Biden thing because there's not much to cover, and a lot of us have already known that Joe Biden is a little too touchy-feely, and it's uncomfortable to view as a third party, even from the distance of watching it through your TV. It's still uncomfortable to watch, but we've all known this for at least the past decade, I'd say. Biden is not. He's not a subtle guy. He's really not, which is why I'm personally so excited that if he does get into the race, he's going to take the nomination, and then he and Donald Trump are going to have this shoot first, ask questions later kind of sort of debating style with each other. It's just going to be an enormous amount of fun to watch. So I'm very excited for that. For anybody who didn't listen to the older show, the live radio show I used to do up in Poland, I used to refer to Joe Biden as Marmaduke if Marmaduke was a real person. And I stand by that. Of course, Marmaduke was never accused of sexual harassment that I know of, but there's still that same sort of like goofiness, I guess, that sort of makes me think of Marmaduke whenever I hear about Joe Biden. But so there is some Joe Biden related news going on today. People are still. I mean, there's a wealth of evidence. I guess it seems too strong a term, but it'll suffice for now. There's a wealth of evidence online that you can find. They're just pictures or video where Joe Biden is just behaving in an uncomfortable way towards typically a woman or a child. The most interesting thing about this to me is how many people are coming out in support of Joe Biden from the left and the right, I guess. Then again, I don't know if I would call Meghan McCain the right anymore. I feel like her father's been disrespected by Donald Trump so much that she is considering being a Democrat out of spite. We'll see. But there are a lot of allegations coming out about Joe Biden. Again, we've known about it for quite some time. He's 76 years old. He didn't just start doing this now. But there's a statement from Joe Biden as of the morning of March 31st, so a couple days ago. This was tweeted out by Bill Russo, who is, I guess he works communications for Joe Biden, possibly. It says comms for at Joe Biden in his bio. And then the other part of his bio says go at Phillies. So the statement from Joe Biden a couple mornings ago was, and I'll just read it verbatim now and then comment after. In my many years on the campaign trail and in public life, I have offered countless handshakes, hugs, expressions of affection, support, and comfort. And not once, never, did I believe I acted inappropriately. If it is suggested I did so, I will listen respectfully, but it was never my intention. I may not recall these moments the same way, and I may be surprised at what I hear, but we have arrived at an important time when women feel they can and should relate their experiences, and men should pay attention, and I will. I will also remain the strongest advocate I can be for the rights of women. I will fight to build on the work I've done in my career to end violence against women and ensure women are treated with the equality they deserve. I will continue to surround myself with trusted women advisors who challenge me to see different perspectives than my own, and I will continue to speak out on these vitally important issues where there is much more progress to be made and crucial fights that must be waged and won. So that's a really well-written statement from Joe Biden. I can't imagine that he has never heard of this before or that he is surprised now. People have been calling him out about this for, like I said, years. This didn't just start. The man's 76. You don't just start touching people weird in your late or your mid to late 70s. It's not typically when that behavior begins. That's not typically when any kind of behavior begins, unless it's related to a medication you're on or some kind of ailment you've picked up. Anyway, that was Joe Biden's statement about this thing. There's a lot of support coming out for Joe Biden, but the weird thing to me is how people are explaining their support for Joe Biden. Basically looking at his personality as a whole, looking at all the great things he's done, looking at how much he's done for women, and people are saying that that's the real Joe Biden. Now, I want everyone to think real hard back to just a couple years ago, a few years ago maybe, Donald Trump on the campaign trail saying some nasty things about grabbing people by the pussy and whatnot. Didn't actually do it, but made a joke about it. Everyone was up in arms about, oh my goodness, my daughter shouldn't have to live in a world where a man who treats women like that is the president and blah, 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 blah. And anyone who came out and supported Trump would say, look at what he's done for women. He's done a lot for women. He's a champion of them. So he says some inappropriate things from time to time. That's fine, but you got to look at him. That's not indicative of his entire personality. And everyone went, you're just an apologist for a sexual harasser. You're just as bad. You're bad too. And everyone was bad. Now, it's not the exact same situation going on here because Joe Biden is actually physically touching people against their will. Whereas I don't recall stories about Donald Trump doing that. There could be some, but I haven't heard about them, and certainly not to the extent that I've heard about Joe Biden touching people over the past 10 years. And I only say over the past 10 years because that's how long Joe Biden has been on my personal radar, since he was Obama's running mate. That was when he entered sort of my field of view in politics, I suppose. So I just think it's weird, but not surprising that the Democrats would come out so strongly in favor of one of their guys and give him the benefit of the doubt and try to look at the bigger picture of who he is as a person and say that these things are not indicative of that man. But they do not do the same thing for Donald Trump. And the only reason I can think of that would be the case is the blind hatred for Donald Trump that comes from the left, to the extent that the Mueller report is seen as a failure, that the Russians not influencing our election is a bad thing to many Democrats. So this Joe Biden thing I really hope that the hypocrisy is not lost on anyone. I hope everyone can see um, how people on the left get second chances and people on the right don't get chances, I guess. Um, it's odd. It's a very, very strange thing, but that's how it works. The left has one set of rules for themselves and a different set of rules for everyone else. Look at James Gunn, director of Guardians of the Galaxy, also accused of sexual harassment, but everybody loved the Guardians of the Galaxy movies so much, he's reinstated. Did he sexually harass anybody? It doesn't matter. Nobody cared. Everybody just wanted Guardians of the Galaxy by James Gunn, and so that's what they got. It's bizarre. We live in a very, very bizarre world where all of the rules and the sort of the societal viewpoints are arbitrary, and they differ from moment to moment. There's no consistency at all. And that's frightening. That should scare the shit out of everybody listening to this. The fact that the rules are so inconsistent, you have no idea what can happen to you tomorrow. It just, there is no set of rules to sort of live by or abide by. It's changing constantly. But only in support of the left. That's what I'm trying to say there. So, Joe Biden, maybe he's not a bad guy. He doesn't strike me as a bad guy, again, because I associate him with Marmaduke. And who could possibly say that Marmaduke is a bad guy? I think Marmaduke just wants to eat garbage. And I assume Joe Biden is a very similar kind of man. Just wants to eat garbage. So, yeah. So there's more allegations coming out about him, and we can expect that all the way until he is dead, probably. But nothing is going to happen to him. He will not be held to the same standards as a Republican who would have been accused of the same thing. Not even close. So, then again, we live in crazy times. Nothing is overly surprising anymore. I think Bill Cosby might have killed a lot of that for a lot of us. Certainly for me, where it's, if Bill Cosby could be maybe the most prolific and I can't think of the word. The word is not coming to me. But if Bill Cosby can be one of the most prolific serial rapists in American history, very few things should surprise you from then onward. I mean, I don't know how many people saw that coming, but I think that was really a turning point where it was sort of like, all right, everything we believe is fake. Everything that we thought was true is not. It was a weird, sobering moment, I think, for people. And I kind of took that with me throughout stuff where, you know, if Bill Cosby is the most prolific serial rapist in American history, it's certainly the most powerful, I would think, that we know of. Let's put it that way. Then anything can happen. Anything is possible. Yeah, and that's a statement that's usually said in a more optimistic, happy way, but no, not this time. So anyways, Joe Biden, who knows? Maybe he does end up still running for president, that he survives this whole thing right now in this post-#MeToo world that we're living in right now. Maybe he somehow navigates those treacherous waters, and I don't know. I don't know. Maybe he does. But supposing he doesn't, there is an update from something called The Week, theweek.com. And this is as of 7:50. So this is from a half an hour ago, as of me recording this. Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York City, may consider a 2020 run if Joe Biden bows out. So let's read some of this article. It says, don't count former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg out of the 2020 race just yet, not even after he counted himself out. Well, that doesn't make sense, but let's get back to this article. Bloomberg might reconsider his decision not to run for president in 2020, Axios reports, noting he would be most likely to enter if former Vice President Joe Biden decides not to run. He could also launch a 2020 bid if Biden does enter the race, but his campaign doesn't last long. As had been previously reported, Biden had been a major factor in Bloomberg's 2020 decision, as he was reportedly worried about whether there would be a centrist spot for him in the race. Still, the Axios report notes it's possible Bloomberg could reconsider, but ultimately just decide not to run a second time. So basically, they're saying that, hey, maybe if Biden bows out, Bloomberg will reconsider. Bit of a stretch. Doesn't seem like Bloomberg has confirmed anything about that. Just seems like wishful thinking on the part of somebody who thinks that Michael Bloomberg is a good centrist candidate for presidency. what happened to, billionaires shouldn't be in charge of these things, right? Isn't that part of the left's rallying cry against Donald Trump? We should put Michael Bloomberg in there? I think not. I think not. So that's what's going on with the Joe Biden stuff. There's really not a whole lot to say about it. It's just something that's going to go on for a very long time. And then there's going to be a very arbitrary decision made based on if people think that he can beat Donald Trump or not. Because at the end of the day, that's what people care about. As much as they like to tout certain causes and different things, a lot of it is political. I'm talking about the politicians and the politicians and the media. They're disingenuous. You can't really believe any of the things they claim are their motives. So I think we should move on from Joe Biden because, like I said, not a ton to look at there. Here's another thing. I'm going to just assume that this is a Democrat because I don't think the mayor of Baltimore is typically Republican, and you can kind of tell that just based on what condition Baltimore is in. If it's in good condition, it's a Republican. If it's not, then it's not. So, I saw this thing. The headline jumped out at me. I couldn't really understand. I couldn't put the pieces together in my head just based on the headline, which is interesting because the headlines usually give away everything, but not this time. So, I'm getting this particular article from NPR, but it is a national story right now. The headline they have is, amid scandal, Baltimore mayor takes indefinite health-related leave. So let's just read here. Baltimore Mayor Catherine Pugh announced she is dealing with health challenges and will take an indefinite leave of absence at the same time her office is engulfed in a scandal involving the profits from her self-published children's books. That's the odd part. So let's keep looking. Pugh's office released a statement late Monday afternoon saying that she has been fighting pneumonia for the past few weeks and that her doctors advised her to focus on her health. So the statement is saying that she's taking an indefinite leave of absence to recuperate from this serious illness. But for weeks prior, Pugh, a Democrat, nailed it, has been the focus of criticism surrounding her Healthy Holly children's book series about a black girl who promotes nutrition and exercise. Just before she announced her leave of absence, the Baltimore Sun, which I'm very surprised still exists, reported that healthcare giant Kaiser Permanente was seeking a contract to provide coverage to city employees and paid $114,000 to purchase some 20,000 copies of the books between 2015 to 2018. The city's spending panel, of which Pugh is a member, awarded a contract worth $48 million in 2017 to Kaiser Foundation Health Plan of the Mid-Atlantic States, Inc., according to The Sun. The mayor, according to the paper, does not appear to have abstained from voting on the contract. Okay, so it looks like there's some shadiness, obviously, between that major corporation and the mayor. And even worse, there's a paper trail. So that's good. Now, last month, The Sun also reported that Pugh profited from business contracts with the nonprofit University of Maryland Medical System, which runs hospitals around Baltimore. Pugh was a board member of UMMS until her resignation on March 18th. Two other board members resigned a day earlier. According to The Sun, the medical system paid Pugh $500,000 for copies of the Healthy Holly books, and the payments were made for a number of years. The Sun also reports, quote, under the deal with the medical system, UMMS paid Pugh $500,000 for copies of the books while she served on its board. UMMS paid $100,000 in each of 5 transactions in 2012, 2013, 2015, 2017, and 2018 to purchase 20,000 copies of her self-published book at $5 per book. So, that is something. Now, Pugh did not mention the scandal in her statement about the indefinite leave due to health. Now, Baltimore's charter states that Baltimore City Council President Bernard Jack Young, so Bernard, whose nickname is Jack, will take over mayoral duties. The change of power goes into effect at 12:01 a.m. Tuesday, so it has taken effect. In a statement of his own, Young called the mayor's leave temporary and said he understands how traumatizing the saga has been for the people of Baltimore. I am utterly heartbroken by the developments that have unfolded over the past several weeks. I pray that Mayor Pugh continues to recover from her illness, Young said in the statement. He also vowed to be a stabilizing force and promoted himself as someone who takes his responsibilities seriously. So we just read that article verbatim from beginning to end. That was amid scandal, Baltimore mayor takes indefinite health-related leave. So that's what it is, children. There's corruption at all levels of government, and it is prevalent and bizarre, and there is almost always a very clumsily left paper trail. Follow the paper trail, people. Like they did on The Wire, which took place in Baltimore. Follow the money. That was a big kind of rallying cry of the sort of the middle seasons, I'd say. 2, 3, 4. That was a damn good show. I mean, that's like the only good part about Baltimore being like really, really crime ridden is the fact that we get shows like The Wire. So that's pretty good. I mean, that's like the only bright side really to, the failed drug war in Baltimore. I'm joking, of course. I don't think there's anything good about it. But let's move along here. Like I said, there's not a ton happening in the news right now. I mean, those are like the Joe Biden thing is like the leading story. We're at the beginning of the week, which is strange. Nobody's saying anything bad about Donald Trump right now, which, I can't remember a time when that was happening. So I decided that I was going to look at some of the problems with America that are going on right now. Things like drugs, violence, corruption, all of the hits. And I was going to maybe give my sort of personal take on these subjects so you can sort of see where I'm coming from, where my sort of base is with things. I'm just going to answer honestly. I'm not going to say something else because it sounds better. I'm also not going to just answer or give an opinion on something I don't know anything about. If I really don't know something about one of these topics, I'll just say that. Because I feel like it would be beneficial to the listener, that's you, if you kind of knew where my base was, so that if you can kind of see how some of my takes on things, where they evolved from. So I'm on this website called thetop10s.com. Thetop10s.com. All top 10 lists. And I guess people vote on the lists. And I found one top 10 problems with America. Though I saw that this goes to over 20. So we'll just do a bunch of them. See how it goes. We're about 20 minutes into the show right now. I don't know how long this episode's going to be. Like I said, there's nothing going on. I mean, I guess I could dive into Beto O'Rourke maybe in a little bit. If there's some time. But maybe not. Maybe I feel like Beto O'Rourke, we need a whole show just for him. And I need to hear a little bit more about him on the campaign trail. Because right now, and I guess this will just be a teaser for when I do talk about Beto O'Rourke, he seems like a guy who doesn't have any political ideas about what to do. It seems a lot like he's telling people what they want to hear. And if somebody asks him a question, he answers in the way that's going to make them smile at him. And that's what he's doing. I don't think there's any substance behind anything that he's doing. I think he's just trying to please crowds right now. I also think he's a fucking weirdo because after he lost, his race to Ted Cruz, he went down to Mexico to eat the rejuvenating dirt or whatever. So that's just kind of strange. But he's polling third right now. And again, like I've said before, polls don't mean jack shit. A poll is a survey. A survey is a person's opinion. A person's opinion changes from second to second, depending on what it is. If you give somebody too long to answer a question, they're going to second guess, they're going to overthink, and they're going to take the time to phrase their answer the way that they want to, rather than giving you the actual raw data you need. So polling doesn't mean anything. Practical example of that, again, is the entire 2016 election. Just shows you the futility of trying to survey people for actual data, actual realistic data. So Beto O'Rourke is polling third in one of these polls as Democratic frontrunner. I can't remember who the top two are. I think Joe Biden is one of them, even though he's not formally in the race yet. And the second place one was somebody else predictable. I do not think it was Kamala Harris, but I honestly can't remember. Let me just take a quick look. Top Dem candidates. Top Dem candidates. So let's go from finance.yahoo, ranking the top Democrats. Let's see if they've got it here. But, oh, that's right. I always forget about him. Just like everyone else is going to when the polling comes around. They're going to fool you twice. Shame on you, by the way, with Bernie Sanders. If you're a Bernie supporter, they are going to do the same thing they did to you in 2016. And there are going to be no consequences for it at all. The Republicans sure as shit are not going to do anything to make the Democratic side more fair. And the Democrats don't want Bernie. The established Democrats don't want Bernie Sanders. So they're going to do it again. There's going to be no accountability. They're going to screw him over again. He's going to go down in history as sort of like a poorly educated Henry Clay. And by poorly educated, I don't mean that Bernie Sanders is just a moron. But, you know, if you're... What I really don't understand is how you can be an elderly Jewish person and still support socialism. Do you have no memory of, and you don't even have to have experienced the pogroms or these, or Nazi Germany yourself. But if you're Bernie Sanders' age, you have relatives that you would have spoken to had they survived these things, and they would have told you the really awful, awful things that have happened. Because if there's one thing socialism excels at, it's the persecution of Jews. Across the board. Go through history. Look back at it. So it just seems really, it's sad to me to see somebody like Bernie Sanders turn to socialism. It's like, have you forgotten the history of your people? This has never been a system that has done anything beneficial for, you know, any marginalized community, really. So it's odd. But Bernie Sanders doesn't stand a fucking chance. And that's because neither political party wants him. Doesn't matter if the people want him. It's not about the people. This is the United States government we're talking about. The people are a means to an end. Keep that in mind at all times. So the top three that are polling right now are Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Beto O'Rourke in that order. And if you really had to put the three of them up against each other, Joe Biden is the clear winner there. But if it was just millennials voting, it would be Bernie Sanders. It would be Bernie Sanders who would win. Actually, no, Bernie Sanders, there's some weird thing going on, and you see it online mostly on Twitter with younger people. There's something called Bernie Bros. And I guess a Bernie bro is just sort of that sort of bro culture that, you know, wears a visor, plays ultimate frisbee, belongs to a fraternity, likes to say that, you know, they're failing a class, but they have an A+ in drinking or partying, you know, that kind of stupid shit. So I think a lot of millennial women don't like the Bernie supporters, and they see Bernie and Bernie supporters is like misogynistic and sexist and stuff. I don't know. I don't get involved in the intricacies of the Bernie Sanders campaign, obviously. I guess I relate to millennials only in the fact that we were born in a similar time. But outside of that, I don't know. So, so I wouldn't worry about Bernie. Joe Biden is the biggest challenger to Donald Trump right now. He's the only one that really could probably play Trump's game and if not win, put up a damn good fight. So that's the guy. If the Democrats want to win and they want to start taking things back because they believe they're entitled to owning all of the government, then Biden's the way to go with that. Certainly not Kamala Harris, certainly not Cory Booker, not Amy Klobuchar, none of those people. And poor Tulsi Gabbard, with I think a whopping 5% right now, is one of the more reasonable, level-headed, good leader Democrats there, who is not doing this for sort of political advancement. I I understand that running for president, you're obviously in it for political advancement, but I don't mean sort of as just to become the president and be famous like Barack Obama. I mean, so almost like the reluctant presidential candidate, which is what Donald Trump appeared to be at first. But then you do any research at all into Roger Stone and you realize that the Trump machine has been basically being built since the 1980s. So, yeah. Anyway, that was a really long aside, I guess, about Beto O'Rourke, which said very little about him. But nevertheless, we are going to look at the 2020 candidates in the coming weeks, of course. A lot more exciting stuff, I'm sure, once we get closer to election time, which should be around the summer. Around the summer, we should have, I might have to do more episodes a week because there's going to be a lot of stuff to cover then. But today, there being not a lot of stuff to cover, I want to look at this top 10 problems with America, and we're just going to read a bunch of them. There's more than 10 here, and I'm going to give you my view on sort of this issue. So the first one on the top 10 is no respect for the rest of the world. And my immediate thought about why that's number one on the top 10 list is because people outside of America are voting on this. Because, of course, Americans aren't going to say that we have no respect for the rest of the world. It is sort of true that we don't have a lot of respect for the rest of the world, but the rest of the world, any country doesn't have a lot of respect for other countries. We live in a world, we don't have a global government. We have all the governments of the world are built on nationalism. And nationalism doesn't work if you're saying that country's just as good as us. No. That's not how it works. You have to be the dominant country, the superior country, number one. Every country thinks they're number one. So there's no respect for the rest of the world shit. I don't know. And that's also pretty, forgetful of history. I mean, how many times did we say France alone? How about that? We really are really trying hard to prop Israel up as like the government of the Middle East. Trump now saying that Golan Heights belongs to the Israelis is an example of that. I think we're trying to we are trying to denuclearize, whether it's working or not, North Korea. We're trying to stop genocide in Syria. We're trying to peacefully transition governments in a democratic style in Venezuela. So no respect for the rest of the world is a fucking kind of insulting. Because we spend an enormous amount of money trying to help the rest of the world, and we get almost nothing out of it except sometimes terrorism. So that's my view on number one, no respect for the rest of the world. I think that's people who think they deserve more and feel like they're not getting any. So number two, Donald Trump. You kind of know my views on Donald Trump. I am a conditional supporter of Donald Trump, as I'm a conditional supporter of any politician. I think Donald Trump has done more good than harm. I think that a lot of what people are angry about with Donald Trump is an incredibly carefully, decades long in the making, crafted persona for Donald Trump that he created with an extreme amount of help from Roger Stone. Agent Provocateur, as he calls himself at the beginning of his documentary. If you don't know anything about Roger Stone, look into him. He's a fascinating figure, whether you like him or not. I almost feel like he defies morality. Roger Stone doesn't exist on the spectrum of morality as we know it. He is an agent of chaos, and his entire thing is spreading chaos. And he's consistent that way. And he doesn't care who hates him, because he does what he has to do. He's a very, very fascinating person, and almost like a Forrest Gump sort of figure, just in that he pops up constantly in major historical events, basically from the 70s till present day. So I would look into him, and after you look into him, take another look at Donald Trump, and then start going, oh wow. Donald Trump is basically living by Roger Stone's rules of how to live. And that's fascinating in itself. So a supplemental resource, if you like the documentary, Get Me Roger Stone, and you want to know more about how that guy kind of thinks and works and sort of the level of influence he's had on government, I would recommend picking up. I'd say wait till it goes on sale, but it's called Stone's Rules, I believe. Let me just check my Kindle here. I did buy it, and I am enjoying it greatly so far. You don't have to have an opinion on Roger Stone, whether he's good or bad, to enjoy the book. It's an excellent insight into how his mind works, and sort of it provides insights into how politics works, particularly campaigning, all the things that lead up to the taking of power. So, yeah, it's called Stone's Rules, and it's very interesting. Very, very interesting. I just read one the other, but I said wait till it goes on sale because it's not a particularly long book. Each chapter is just a rule with a couple pages at the most of sort of examples and explanations as to why the rule is important and what it provides you if you follow it. So, but I read one just the other day that said something like, always put a nickname on your opponent, because the nickname, people remember the nickname more than they remember a lot of other things. And that's exactly what Donald Trump has done from day one. And it's one of the things that made a lot of people love Donald Trump, was things like calling Jeb Bush low energy Jeb, calling Ted Cruz lion Ted Cruz. People still say crooked Hillary. They still say crooked Hillary. That was 2 years ago. They still call Hillary Clinton crooked Hillary. And that was a Roger Stone rule, to do that kind of thing. And Donald Trump stuck by that rule. And look at how wildly successful he became, or how wildly, I don't know, socially accepted, I guess, maybe his nicknames became. You kind of get the gist of what I'm trying to say, I hope. So, Donald Trump, yeah. Racism, number 3. It's bad, obviously. Yeah, I mean, that's way too broad. What do I say? What do I dive into? Which part of it do I look at? Racism. It's bad. It's bad. I don't want it around, I guess. It'd be the way to for me to say it. But I guess I'll say that a lot of the racism that still does exists in the education system, from what I understand. One of my best friends was a teacher for a while, and he worked in the South as a teacher, and he would tell me a lot about sort of the history of the education system in the South, the Carolinas specifically, and how a lot of the institutional racism that existed in the South, when all of that was outlawed and cracked down upon, a lot of the really intelligent racists took all of that racial energy and pumped it into like the education system. And so there's still a lot of institutional racism, particularly in the South, and it still is a major problem. So I don't think we're out of the woods yet when it comes to racism. I do think that we have some of the, I mean, I'm kind of basing this off of things that I've heard. You know, I haven't seen the data myself. People have quoted the data. I've seen several different people, and like reputable people, bring up the racism stuff and say that it is actually, we are at sort of a, I guess, it would be considered a high point, but it would be low numbers when it comes to sort of active racial situations. It seems bad because the media hyper focuses on the really bad stuff, of course. If you believe the media, you would think that an airplane crashes once a day, and that doesn't happen. So with the racism stuff, it's a lot of the racism in this country is kept alive by the media and by political candidates, because it can be used as a means to an end. Political candidates can use it to prop up a law and order platform for themselves to at least partially run on. So that's why they keep racism going. And the media knows that racial stories equate to advertising dollars and website clicks. And so that's why they pump up racism also. I'm not saying that there isn't any racism. There's plenty. It's still out there all over the place, and it's not just whites on everybody else. There are Hispanic people racist against black people. There are Asian people racist against Hispanic people. White people racist against everybody has the potential to be racist against everybody else. But those aren't the sexy stories that get pumped up. So it seems bad. It seems like white people are really trying to take down everybody. But from what I've heard, the data says that we're actually in a pretty racially peaceful time relative to history. So I don't know. I don't know what to believe with that. I do think that we're certainly not even close to out of the woods yet with racism, and we probably won't be for quite some time. I would say another 2 generations, and we might have made a good dent in it. But it might never go away. We don't know. So racism, that's a complicated topic, and it's one that you just hear the word racism, and everybody just wants to find the nearest bush to hide into and peek out of like a cartoon character until the danger is gone. But yeah, so let's move on here. Number 4, the education system. Now, I've spoken ad nauseum about the education system. I think I did quite a bit of it last week and then maybe the week before, so maybe every episode now. I don't want to talk about the education system right now because I would just be repeating all those points. It's broken. It needs to be torn down and rebuilt to sort of keep up with modern progress, and it hasn't. And we give teachers way too many perks, and we don't hold them accountable for a lot of things. So, education system, broken, needs to be fixed. Not a fan. Number 5 is destroying the environment. So, just like racism, I'll say, obviously, that's bad. Destroying the environment is bad. The environment is something, and I've spoken about this also on this show, that it's sort of a very confusing world to look into. It's sort of arguments about the environment. Because the idea of climate change and global warming is still not clear for most people. There might be I'm sure there are scientists on both sides beating their heads against the wall, just saying, why won't people fucking listen to what we're saying? And we want to. I think as the people, the people want to know if climate change is happening or not, but it's hard to find trustworthy news on that sort of thing. However, things like fracking, I'm not a fan of. I have said on previous shows, the live ones typically, that I'm not a fan of the Keystone XL pipeline or the Keystone pipeline. None of that shit. Please stop building pipelines and things through Indian land. What is it, 1840? Why are we still building like oil pipelines through fucking Native American land? How is it possible that that's happening still in 2019? So I don't like that kind of stuff. I don't like that when fracking goes on, people in a radius of I don't know how many miles turn their water on, and then they hold a lighter to the water, and the water lights on fire. That's fucking crazy. So, yeah, there are problems. There are problems going on with how we treat the environment and how the environment then goes on to affect us. So, yeah, obviously, destroying the environment is bad. I wish there was more clear information about climate change. I really do. But that's, we're not there yet, as far as I know. So, also, whatever's happening in Flint, I guess stop putting it in the water. Whatever sewage or radioactive runoff that they need to get rid of, don't put it in the water. Students can't drink anymore. Children can't drink water in Flint. So, destroying the environment, bad. That's my stance. How about you? 6, drugs. I've, again, brought this up previously. I saw this guy, Johan Hari, on the Joe Rogan Experience, and he made a very compelling case for legalizing all drugs, but doing it, and that doesn't mean complete fucking anarchy in the streets, people just doing meth and shooting up heroin, and then going about, or just on the sidewalk and then, going into work and smoking crack. No, that's not what I mean by legalize all the drugs. You have to do it safely, and by me, it's Johan Hari, really. I'd say look into him. he used heroin, which I guess heroin is pretty much, other than fentanyl now, heroin is the kingpin of the deadly drugs, I'd say. It's the one that everybody, you hear heroin spoken about in hushed voices. It's an epidemic now. Nobody in our government wants to look at the causes of drug addiction, because there are causes, and the causes, believe it or not, come from human behavior, and opportunity, human behavior, and the idea of meaning or purpose in life. Those are key elements into drug addiction. And I look at Thatcherism in the UK. When Thatcherism kicked in, and it did not do great things for lower class people or blue collar working people, the people working in the factories. A lot of industrial jobs went away. A lot of factories shut down. It devastated the country of Wales, where after you see a rise in Thatcherism and a decrease in sort of industrialization, industrial jobs, you see a spike in heroin use. And that's really important. And if you can recognize that there, you can recognize it in other places. You can start to see, like, oh, why are all of these people turning to drugs now that they have no more purpose or meaning? And it's not just because it's fun or it feels good or it numbs you. It serves a purpose that you're not getting that feeling from other healthier things. So there's a lot to it too. I'm scratching the surface here, and I'm not an expert. But I've known a lot of people involved in the world of drugs. And I'm not a drug dealer. I'm not a drug user. Never was any kind of an addict or anything like that. I'm not trying to imply some kind of a dark history. But I've had friends who were, some of them became addicted to heroin or were addicted to heroin when I met them. I knew a guy once who was addicted to both heroin and crack. So I have some insight into drug addiction. I've spoken to these people at length about drugs, and their experiences are fascinating and very enlightening. And you see a recurring trend of sort of misery leading to it, and not having opportunities. It's really, opportunity and purpose are so fucking crucial in terms of fighting drug addiction that it's frightening that hasn't really been fully explored yet, by the people who are in charge of policy decisions anyway. Talk to the people in the medical community. People in the medical community also know what's going on with this, and they're not happy about it either. But right now you have politicians who don't give a shit, and you have pharmaceutical companies who also don't give a shit, and insurance companies who don't give a shit. And so you have this world where drugs, like this person says here, the number one statement under this drugs thing is drugs are taking over our country. Sort of. I don't think it's drugs that's taking over the country, though. I think it's hopelessness. I think it's disillusionment. I think it's disenfranchisement. All of these other things. It starts in the mind. There's a triggering moment. There's something that causes it to happen. And it's the same thing for an enormous amount of the population of drug users. So drugs, you need better people in the government looking into that. Because if you think that the increasing laws against drug users or companies that produce things to be used in drugs, if you think those things are stopping the drug addiction, if you think trimming the branches is the same as uprooting the tree, then you're a fucking moron, and you shouldn't be involved in that in our government. And that's who I'm referring to when I said fucking moron. People in the government who are trying to attack this thing but aren't even trying to understand it first. So, that's my thought on drugs. I feel I have some passionate ideas about sort of the world of mental health. I studied a good amount of psychology in the short time I was in college. That's probably the career path I might have ended up in had I not dropped out. There are a lot of reasons for a lot of things. But anyway, bullying is number 7. Bullying, I think, is Oddly enough, and I don't know if I really put these things together until right this second, bullying is strangely a similar beast to drugs. Um, you have a lot of older people at the top of these institutions. In this case, it would probably be the school districts, who see a problem and they think that if we trim the branches, everything will be fine instead of uprooting the causes. There's also, I'm not a great person when it comes to talking about bullying, because bullying really changed from the time I was in school to when I was out of school. And it was a very short window of time where I wasn't. No. That's not right. It was very shortly after I graduated from high school. The entire conversation about bullying just fucking changed. Like, you started hearing a lot more about suicides. And that was weird. And that's something that I think if you're my age or older, you look at that and you go, what happened? How did this happen? Because bullying is weird. And what I mean by bullying is weird is that, I don't know, I almost want to use a different term for bullying, because bullying is part of sort of your human DNA. Bullying is a way of establishing a hierarchy, more or less. And because we're just primates who think that we're really fucking cool and smart, and definitely not destructive of everything we come into contact with, because we're like that, we have that sort of innate competition or need to dominate others. We have that in us. We do. I mean, all of our common ancestors, back when, I don't know what the time period would be. I'm not an anthropologist or archaeologist, believe it or not. But there's evidence that, of all the other sort of humanoid species that were walking around at the same time as our sort of more primal ancestors, our ancestors not only decimated their populations by killing them, but our ancestors ate them also. So a lot of our species is sort of built on cannibalism in a weird way. And the evidence of that is that, and I only know about this because I've been reading the Hannibal Lecter books lately. So, there is this thing that was developed in the brain, sort of an immunity, and I think people still carry it to this day. If you can probably have it tested, where you have an immunity to a certain disease that you could acquire from eating someone's brain, and having that immunity means that you were able to eat a human brain without getting sick. And to develop that immunity means you probably had to dabble in that. So, getting back to my point of bullying, we have this weird need to dominate, this animalistic need to dominate, and we have that in us, and particularly males. You see that a lot more with males than females, but that's not saying that it doesn't happen in females. Females tend to be, more verbal, I'd say, with the bullying stuff, whereas males will be more physical, and I feel like male bullying and female bullying are two completely different beasts and have to be looked at as different. I don't think you can hold those two things to the same sort of standards, because men behave differently than women. And before you want to call me a sexist or a misogynist or whatever, I'm going off of what I've seen from my personal experience and also basic biology. Men and women are different. They are. In several ways. Not always, and they're not all important. You shouldn't hold down one side, because of the other or whatever. It's, my point there is, I'm not saying that one side is not, or, fuck it. Let's just move on here. But men and women, the way that they bully is different, and the causes of the bullying are different, and the reactions to the bullying are different. So, like, when I was growing up, bullying it existed, I guess. It was a lot more like people would be picked on. And again, it looks a lot like primates trying to establish hierarchy, needling at each other, trying to get somebody to feel lesser than you so that you can feel higher than them. I'm not saying that this is right, but I'm saying that it's in our DNA to be like this. There is that level of competitiveness and the need to dominate. We have that. We have it, and it happens all across society. So, but the weird thing is the apparent uptick in bullying after about 2010. Maybe a little bit before that. But I think a lot of the issues with the bullying crisis that we're seeing right now, first of all, is social media stuff. That's, you can't really escape a lot of it once you go home, because then it's just waiting for you online. You've heard that before. And it's true. It is true, I'm sure. But I think a lot of the issue is the way that the schools handle it. And this is another little rant about school districts. I've talked about this before, too, that I think if schools not only allowed but encouraged students to stand up against their bullies, and I'm not saying bring a fucking gun to the school, nothing like that. This is to avoid situations like that, because bullying leads to suicide and it leads to mass shootings. These are not things that we want in society. So, I feel like, just look at let's use a fake example. How about we have a kid, he's in school, he's bullied relentlessly. Let's just say he's bullied in the hallways. He's got classes with some kids that bully him. He can tune it out a little bit because he's got his, some friends. He's got, he's got class to focus on, study to focus on, all that kind of stuff. And then he goes on the bus, and he gets it on the bus from the kids on the bus. Then he goes home, and, he goes online to do whatever, and then he gets hit with whatever. I'm not sure what form the cyberbullying really kind of takes. But let's say that he goes and he has that done, right? And then let's say that this goes on for, 6 months to a year. That seems like a very long time. But let's just say that's what happens. And then finally, the kid just fucking snaps, right? Because he's, at the end of the day, he's a primate. There's something primal in the head. And if you feel like you can't continue existing in a particular way, all bets are off. You become very desperate to find a different way to exist, and your behavior becomes erratic. So, those kids then, let's say that kid goes to school, and the ringleader who's been torturing him for 6 months to a year, consequence-free. Let's say the kid finally, let's say he's standing on the lunch line, and the bully kid starts just poking him in the back of the neck. I don't know what bullies do, but I assume that would be something, right? Let's say he's poking him in the back of the neck and just calling him some kind of a slur, right? And the kid just turns around, picks up his tray, and just fucking wails the dude in the face with it, right? Breaks his nose, blood everywhere. The kid's on the ground. They're both taken to the office, and the principal suspends them both for the same amount of time. If you're the kid who was tortured for 6 months to a year, and you finally stood up for yourself, and you took the power back, and then you have an authority figure come and tell you that what you did is wrong, and that you deserve to be punished for standing up to yourself, that's going to breed an enormous amount of not only resentment, but hopelessness also. And then you're going to see things like suicide. You're going to see desperate moments. And I think a lot of the problem is these lazy fucking school administrators and teachers and anybody who is supposed to be taking care of the kids and are not, because they either don't care or they can't be bothered to do their fucking jobs. I don't know, because it's weird, because when I was in school, it wasn't like that. There were people, I don't know, everybody just kind of made fun of everybody, sort of. It was nothing really got too out of control. But I don't know what's happened lately with schools. But I do think that it's the zero tolerance policy. And zero tolerance policy means I can't be bothered to do my job. If you hear zero tolerance policy from somebody in an authority position, it means I cannot be bothered to do my job. And the reason that I say that so confidently is because if they did do their job completely and fully to the extent that they're supposed to, there wouldn't be something called the zero tolerance policy. The zero tolerance policy just means, oh, you were both fighting? I don't give a shit about the cause. I don't care why it happened. No fighting. You're both suspended. Completely missing the fucking point altogether. And that's how you end up with school shootings and suicides. And it continues on, and everyone in the school, the school administration spots, they all go, oh, why is this happening? Oh, we have to stop this. This is an epidemic. Another assembly. Quickly, get all the students into the auditorium. We have to have another assembly. Another speaker has to come and talk about bullying. No. You just have to stop forcing people to feel so helpless and feel that their hands are so tied that the only thing they can do is react in a way that you would deem insane. And that's my kind of views on bullying. Maybe we're not going to get past 10 because that was 7. And we're a little over an hour now. Number 8, corruption. Again, it's bad. It's in all elements of society. It's this sort of need for self-preservation that creates corruption and the lack of oversight. Basic stuff. Corruption, it exists everywhere. Anytime there is an authority figure, there is corruption somewhere nearby, if not right there in front of you. So, corruption, yeah, it's bad. And the way that you get rid of corruption is you hold people accountable. If you hire somebody to do a job and they fail to do that job, you stop giving them rewards. You start punishing bad behavior. That's how you stop corruption. But the people who are in the position to stop corruption are the ones who are corrupt. So they're not going to stop it either. They're getting way too much out of it. So that's corruption for you. It exists and it's not going anywhere. Number 9, Barack Obama. Barack Obama, I'm over him. I'm over it. I mean, I don't know. I've said a lot about him over the years. I don't like him. I think he is a very, very ineffective president. I think at the end of the day, when the history books are written, if they're not written by liberals who control all speech and thought at the moment, if it gets worse and they start controlling his historical narratives, you're going to see Barack Obama listed up there with George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. The reality is, he didn't really do a lot. He really didn't do a lot. He created an enormous amount of racial tension in the country, and I don't mean that by him just existing. I know that was something that was out there for quite some time. But Barack Obama, the thing that says it all to me, and that has made me just dislike him immensely, was there were 5 police officers shot by some kind of side group of Black Lives Matter, a splinter group that was very violent, and 5 police officers in Texas were effectively assassinated by these sort of domestic terrorists. I mean, what else would you call them? And Barack Obama went to speak at the memorial for the 5 police officers in Texas. And I remember watching it live on TV, and I remember Barack Obama, when he was memorializing, I guess, whatever the term is, he had made a point of saying that the police have to be better. He said something like the Black Lives Matter stuff has to be better. The communities have to be better. They have to work more with the police. But he said that the police also have to try to do better. At a memorial for 5 dead police officers, he put part of the blame on the police officers for their death. He fucking did that on live television. I watched it happen. So, what do I think about Barack Obama? Yeah. And number 10, terrorists. Again, is a very sort of, I don't know, it's a very big subject. There are different kinds of terrorists, and that depends on ethnicity, religion, what's it called? Cultural relativity, I guess, which is not a it's a philosophy of ethics that folds under questioning immediately. But terrorism, it's hard. You can talk about the idea of the terrorist, but to talk about terrorism as it relates to America, there's a lot of different groups, and they're all very different, and it has a lot to do with sort of, where they're based out of and who it is that is running them and what their ideologies are. Obviously, terrorism is bad. It's not the way to go, and part of the problem with terrorism is that the countries where the terrorists typically come from begin to regard those terrorists as freedom fighters. And when you label a terrorist a freedom fighter, you get a very confusing narrative, and you get a lot of people very confused about who is right and who is wrong. Yeah, I don't know. Terrorism is bad. I don't know how you defeat it because it's an idea, and it's an idea that adapts, like I said, to whatever it needs to adapt to. Whatever group of people it needs to adapt to, it adapts easily, terrorism, because it is an idea. It's like a virus that you can't kill. It just moves from place to place and corrupts its host. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess, yeah, here's somebody who wrote a little comment that on it says, they are bad people. And I agree. And somebody said, not only bad for USA, but bad for the whole world. And I agree with that as well. So, that was number 10, terrorists. So that was my views on terrorists, Barack Obama, corruption, bullying, drugs, destroying the environment, the education system, sort of, racism, Donald Trump, and the lack of respect for the rest of the world. So that was the 10. There are more on this list. Maybe we'll come back to this at a later date if the news is kind of slow like it is recently, which is weird. It's the beginning of the week. There should be a lot more going on. So anyway, I guess my time is pretty much up. I did an hour, and that's typically what I do. So thank you all for listening again to The Fringe. And yeah, I will be back either later this week or next week, hopefully on Monday. Hopefully things will kind of, the schedule around here will return to normal, and I'll be able to record in a more regular sort of way, putting out episodes regularly. Yeah. So this was Tuesday's show, episode 3, I believe. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you soon.